There are officially 7 rounds to go in the 2024 NRL season, and the race towards the finals is shaping up to be as good as it has ever been. 13 wins was a magic number last season, and people seem to think that that'll be the mark again this year. But I actually reckon there'll be one team that does finish on 13 wins and misses the finals. I've mapped out the run home for every team in and around that finals race that can get to 13 wins. Every single one of these teams is still in with a chance of playing finals this year. It is all to play for. Here's how I see it playing out. Pulling up the rear of the bunch, finishing in 15th place, I've got the Gold Coast Titans. And sorry Titans fans, but looking at these games individually, I find it hard to tip your side in any of them. Gold Coast need to win 7 of these games to hit 13 wins, but that looks all but impossible at this stage. They were blown off the park by Manly last week, and every one of the teams that they come up against will have something to play for. Looking at the big picture, I'm not all that confident about tipping them to go winless for the rest of the season. But as I said, when you take it game by game, you can't really find one there that they're likely to win. If they are to pick up a result or two though, I think AJ Brimson will play a big part in it. Everyone always talks about David Fifita and Tino Fa'asuamaleaui for the Titans, but one of my unpopular opinions is that AJ Brimson is actually the best player on the Gold Coast. Annoyingly for him, he's spent very little time at fullback and 5/8 this season, but he returns this week and claims that his days of playing centre are done. Next up, in 14th place, I've got the Canberra Raiders. Less so because of the way they're playing, and more so because their run home is dreadful. I've given them a win in that home game against the Sea Eagles, but I've given it an orange indicator, which signifies that it's a game that could definitely go either way. But they've got away trips against the Bulldogs, Cowboys, Roosters, and Dragons, who are all currently in and around the top 8. Not to mention home fixtures against the informed Rabbitohs and the high-flying Panthers. Their key man for the run home is without a doubt Jamal Fogarty. The halfback has been sorely missed for Canberra this season and played a huge role in their win at home against the New Zealand Warriors last week. If the Raiders are to grab enough wins to make an unlikely run into the finals, it'll be off the back of him. But I wouldn't get disheartened by this if I were a Raiders fan. A heap of people had Canberra tipped for the spoon this year, and on paper I would probably have them below 14th. The Raiders are a side to me who consistently overachieve, and they have nothing to be ashamed of this year. Occupying 13th spot for me is the Newcastle Knights. Newcastle were one of the darlings of last year, going unbeaten in the last 10 rounds, charging into the finals. But they struggled for consistency this season and need a hell of a run home after losing to the Broncos at home last week. I can see them picking up a couple of wins in what's left of the season, but they need 5 more to hit 13. And I can't see them being the likes of Penrith or Cronulla away from home. By the time that Rabbitohs game comes along, 13 wins would no longer be possible, and I see them losing games against Souths and the Dragons, who at that point will probably still have something to play for. Their key man comes as no surprise in Kalen Ponga. The star fullback has only managed 9 appearances this season due to injury, and with the Knights halves not having a heap of X factor in attack, the responsibility does fall to him to carry this side on his back if they're going to make a run into the finals. Next up, in 12th spot, I've got the South Sydney Rabbitohs. Back in round 11, the Rabbitohs had only 1 win, they had a record-breakingly bad defence and sat rock bottom of the competition. But they found a resurgence under interim coach Ben Hornby and are finally playing at the level that we expect them to. Unfortunately for them, like the Raiders, I see them being victims of a really tough run home. They need 6 from their last 7 to hit 13 wins, and they play each of the top 4 teams in that time. They do have a side that's capable of winning those games, but on the balance of probability, it's hard to see them winning enough of them to make the finals. If they do though, their key man will be Cody Walker. It's easy to forget that the halfback is 34 years old, because he plays with the energy and speed of a player in his mid-20s. He's the guy who unlocks the likes of Latrell Mitchell and Alex Johnston, and South will need every bit of his brilliance if they're going to make the top 8 from here. Above them, unfortunately for everyone watching this from across the Tasman, I've got the Wars sitting in 11th come the end of the year. They were the only side more loved by neutrals than the Knights at the end of last season, but they have been well off the top 4 pace that they set in 2023 and have struggled with a number of key long-term injuries and tight losses. Their draw against the Sea Eagles means they could possibly get into the finals with only 12 wins, but that does still leave them needing 5 wins from their remaining 6, which I do struggle to see them doing. I have tipped them in all 3 remaining home games, although giving them that win against the Bulldogs may be a little generous. Their key man in the run home has to be Shaun Johnson, who is scheduled to return from injury against the Tigers. The veteran halfback was one of the best players in the competition last season, but hasn't been near that form in 2024. He will be desperate to return from injury and deliver for his beloved Warriors. Then in 10th, I've got another side who I think have managed to overachieve this season in the Dragons. St George Illawarra have been super impressive this season under the coaching of Shane Flanagan and have gone a long way to dispelling the notion that they are a one-man team with Ben Hunt. They only need another 4 wins to hit 13 for the season, but I do have them falling agonizingly short of that mark. It'd take a huge effort to beat either the Panthers or the Storm, and I would tip the Bulldogs to get the win over them as well. That would leave them in a position where they need 4 wins from their last 4 games. And while I do back them in 3 of those, whether or not they make the finals could well be determined by that derby clash against the Sharks down in Wollongong. Now you would think that I have Ben Hunt as their key player for the run home, but I think you kind of know what you're going to get with Ben Hunt. So instead I've gone with Tyrell Sloan. He has found a heap of confidence and consistency under Shane Flanagan. And if he can break open a few of these games, it will go a long way towards the Dragons making the top 8. And the final team that I predict to miss the finals and finish in that soul-crushing 9th position is the Dolphins. The NRL's newest team sat in the top 4 until round 16, but injuries to key players are mounting and their run home could definitely be easier. The Dolphins are the unlucky team that I tip to finish on 13 wins and still miss out on the playoffs on points difference. I'm backing them to get wins against the Titans, Warriors, Bulldogs and Knights, with that away game against Canterbury actually being played up in Bundaberg. Obviously they could easily get into that top 8 with a couple of big wins, but I expect their for and against could take hits against the Roosters and the Storm, so they do just miss out for me. If points are king though, there are few players in this comp with more points in them than Hamiso Tabuai-Fidow. The fullback got a double in their golden point loss to the Panthers last week, and is a man who could transform this good team into a great team heading into the finals. The first team I've got predicted to make the top 8 is a side who looked dead and buried a week ago after losing 6 on the trot. It's the Brisbane Broncos. The injury to Adam Reynolds way back in round 9 absolutely derailed their season, but they look like a completely different team in his return against the Knights last week. Brisbane need 5 wins from their last 6 to get to 13 in total, which as you can see I am just about backing them to do. I do think they've got enough confidence to beat the Bulldogs at home this week, and probably enough quality to beat the Titans and the Eels beyond that. But the games against the Cowboys and Dolphins could easily go either way. The prediction that stands out here though is that I see them beating the Storm in round 27. Now hear me out because it is not as insane as it first looks. I reckon by that point Melbourne will have wrapped up the minor premiership and will be resting just about everyone that they can. And getting a win there against a Melbourne reserve grade side could be what gets Brisbane into the finals. Their hopes lie on the shoulders of their brilliant halfback Adam Reynolds. If he can be enough of a calming influence on the likes of Reece Walsh and Ezra Mann, then the Broncos are going to be a really tough side to beat. Then above them in 7th place, I've got the Canterbury Bulldogs. Before the season, if you'd have asked a Bulldogs fan whether they'd take a 7th place finish, I doubt you'd have found many that would say no. But they've sat above that spot for so much of this season and will be disappointed to not secure a home final if they do finish in 7th. Canterbury need another 4 wins, which I do back them to get. I expect them to get the job done against the Raiders and Dragons, but I can see them struggling against the Broncos and the Dolphins. And obviously playing over in New Zealand is always a tough road trip. But I am backing them in their final 2 games at home against the Sea Eagles and the Cowboys, which would consolidate their final spot. The man that's the key to this Bulldogs side is Matt Burton. Before this season, there were a heap of calls for him to play centre after a really tough season at Canterbury. But his form at 5'8" this year has been impressive, especially after he was paired with Toby Sexton. Burton has delivered in a number of crucial moments for the Dogs this year, and they'll need that to continue if they're to potentially make a top 4 push this season. Then up, flying high, I've got Manly sitting pretty in 6th. They've found a way to get a few very solid wins so far this year, and it's got them in a position where they could be a bit of a dark horse coming into the back end of the season. The Sea Eagles only need another 3 wins to hit 13, but their draw against the Warriors earlier in the season is what will set them apart from the other teams who finish on 13 wins. That being said though, while their run home could be harder, there are a number of tricky fixtures in there. I do expect that the Roosters will bounce back this week and beat them, but even their other 2 losses against the Raiders and Bulldogs are purely off gut feeling. Those games could absolutely end up being Manly wins. I expect them to record easy enough wins against the Warriors and Tigers, and likely a sold out Brookie for the final game of the season will probably be enough to get them home against the Sharks. Their key man is none other than Tom Trbojevic, who has struggled to stay on the field since his insane 2021 form. But he did look extremely impressive last time out against the Titans. The way those orange mark games go could easily hinge on whether we see Turbo at his best in those fixtures. And last but definitely not least, I've got the Cowboys finishing in 5th place as the best of the rest. Their win at home to the Bulldogs last week was a crucial step, and could even put them in top 4 contention if other results go their way. They need another 3 wins from this point to reach 13, and I've got them down to win their next 4 games, 3 of which are at home. But games against the Sharks and particularly the Broncos will prove very tricky. I do have a sneaking feeling that they may be able to pull off an upset at home against the Storm coming off that bye, but the Cowboys will be doing everything they can to avoid a situation where they have to win that game. Their key man for the run home is halfback Chad Townsend. The veteran is departing North Queensland at the end of this year and will be desperate to bring his side into September for his final chapter with the Cowboys. If he's able to play his role at a decent level, it will free up the likes of Tom Dearden and Scott Drinkwater to do what they do best. And so that's it. This is my predicted table from 5th to 15th by the end of the regular season. Do you agree or disagree? Let me know in the comments section. Enjoy the run home to the finals.